Welcome to the Travel, Pray, Slay podcast. It's me, Toya Nicole, and I am so excited because today we have another interview. You all know how much I love my interviews. And so I am so excited to be joined by Khia Glover of Notes by Khia. So, Khia, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your business?
Hi. So thank you so much for having me.
Mhm.
Like she said, my name is Kaya, and I started Notes by Kaya. It started off just by a little blog. I would share different things that God was showing me in my life. Eventually, as I got more into the social work and therapy, mental health realm, it kind of shifted to be more focused on those kinds of things. And I have also started adding services, so doing mental health coaching, speaking at different events, having my own events, and just really educating my community and helping them to grow. I always want to empower, educate, inspire. That is what I base everything off of.
Mhm.
From Oklahoma, I have a 13-year-old, and so really learning that mom role because she is I am adopting her in the process of that.
Awesome.
So yeah, jumped right on
You got
into
a lot going
yeah,
on.
I do.
So I always like to make sure I get people's background rights and that they have a chance to give their receipts. So I know
Okay.
you are a licensed social worker, correct? Like, what
Yes.
all degrees do you have, sis, and
Okay.
official titles? And tell us, because we are going to be getting, deep into talking about mental health and
Yeah.
therapy. So I really want people to understand, the perspective that you're coming from and your level of experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So my bachelor's is in sociology, human services.
Okay.
I really started off wanting to work with foster care, adoption, things like that. Our family adopting my brother was really kind of the main piece that really pushed me into that. I had some passions about different social issues and things like
Hmm.
that, but that was really, I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do.
Love.
And then I went on to get my master's from University of Southern California in social work. My specialty is children and families, and I have been working with children and families in several different avenues. So teaching and different things for 10 plus years.
Awesome.
And so then I was able to go into therapy and start doing that. I currently, along with therapy, also am a school social worker. So I work very, very closely with children and families, currently working in elementary schools. But I have worked with every single age group you can imagine.
Awesome. I love that. So we met via the Black Christian Influencers Facebook community, and that is how we connected. So, very similar to me, you have a background in Christianity, in lining with your work as a social worker. And so that's really why I wanted you on. And, one of the things that attracted me to you and your business and platform was the conversations that you are having with the hashtag heal sis.
Mhm.
So talk to me a little bit about that. Why do you think it is so important for women, specifically women of color, Black women? I love to just call it out what it is.
Yes, me too.
Black women, to heal and be whole. What's the importance of that?
Mm.
Mm,
So it gets really deep, right? So working with families, I see a lot. And
yeah,
I see how generations are impacted a lot of times by the same things, and it just gets carried over.
yeah.
And it's like you have to heal not just for yourself, but for your daughters, for the girls
Hmm.
and women that are going to come behind you. And when we
Hmm.
don't heal, what we don't realize is that it impacts so many different parts of our lives. So,
Yeah.
um, people always talk about therapists wanting to go back to childhood, but there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
And it's because different things that happen, because our parents are the foundation, right?
Yeah.
And so when things happen within that unit, whether that's a parent not being in the home or
Mm-hmm.
abuse, substance use, any of those kinds of things, molestation, rape, all of those different kinds of traumas, even if your family was pretty normal, which I don't even know what that word means,
Yeah.
but
Picture perfect, but
yes,
actually not really normal.
exactly. We all have something, and it might be like for me, my parents have been married my entire life. So they've been married 30 years. They
Uh-huh.
still are. I have three younger siblings. We all went to church. And
Mm-hmm.
so looking at that unit, you might think, oh, they got it.
The
Well,
Huxtables.
not exactly. And so there are just smaller things. I've struggled with depression, anxiety for a very, very, very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it came from the different dynamics. My dad and I didn't always get along. And I mean, my mom and I didn't always either, but it was a little easier for us to reconnect after different issues than
Yeah.
with me and my dad. So, my biggest thing that I've learned in going through my own therapy is not feeling seen, not feeling heard
Mm.
really impacts me a lot.
Yeah.
And so there are still things now in other relationships, at work, with
Yeah.
friendships, where that comes up and it might cause different issues. And so I don't want to put those issues onto someone else,
Yep.
right? So when you're in a relationship, maybe with your significant other or whatever, you might be bickering about something and you think that the issue is that they didn't take the trash out, but really it's something completely different.
Right.
And I don't want to have disruptions in
Mm-hmm.
other relationships or even my career, um, because I haven't healed these different
Yeah.
parts of myself. And so that's why I think it's so important, because a lot of times we don't even realize how much this stuff is impacting us and
Mm-hmm.
how, in what ways.
Yeah.
And we have to learn to, or we have to get to a point where we are healing those parts of
Mm-hmm.
ourselves so that we can be our best, so that we can show the girls and women, even the boys and men behind us,
Mm-hmm.
the importance of that. And so that they can have an even healthier start.
And I think it's so important what you said because generational curses, right? So you speak about
Mhm.
the family dynamic and, being a parent, how you don't want to pass that down. But like you said, too, it's even for the people we're interacting with. And so I don't have children yet, but it's like, yeah, I think about my fellow sister, my best friend,
Mhm.
my colleagues.
Yeah.
Some of this stuff starts showing up in your work style. And if you are a leader, there are so many people that are dealing with difficult bosses in the
Ooh,
workplace that
yes.
really just need to go to therapy to be better. And, that could, disrupt a whole organization. And so it is, we have to heal. And I think I'm sure you've seen this too, like a meme that floats around that says, a lot of us are in therapy because the other people in our life
Mhm.
refuse to go to therapy, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so if you are a person who recognizes the importance and the transformation that can happen with therapy, and you are dealing with someone in your life that isn't, therapy becomes even more important,
Right.
because it is true, like until we are all healed, we can't have those healthy relationships, work, personal, whatever, familial, right? And
Right.
so I've shared on the podcast before that I have gone to therapy. I've really never shared my journey, but long story short, the first time I started going to therapy was in 2013. And, I was dealing with like three primary issues. I had an unhealthy relationship with food. I was significantly overweight and I had not been for most of my adult life. And so there was a period where there was a significant amount of weight gain that was directly attributed to this unhealthy relationship I had with food. It was clear I was an emotional eater, right? That created some other issues, right? And then I had a series of just what felt like unhealthy relationships, right? Romantic relationships with the men in my life, where it was just a string of me dating emotionally unavailable men. I later discovered that's what it was in therapy, obviously.
Yeah.
And then I was very dissatisfied with my job. And for those of you all that know about my book or have read it, I ended up quitting that corporate job. Thank you, therapy. But some of that was because I felt purpose to do something else. There was this struggle, right? But to your point about therapists, I always want to talk about childhood. So I went in there with those three things. And what we quickly realized that at the root of all of that was the absentee relationship that I had with my father. And I had to sort all of that out because not only was my father absent for the majority of my life, he then passed away. So there was this unresolved, you know, things too, right? It's not like I could bring him into the therapy session. It's not like I could call him and talk through things. He died just short of us getting to that place, right?
Wow.
And so I had to work through all of that, right? And so much of it was connected to, our childhood. And that, put me in therapy for a couple of years, but there was so much to untangle. And then it all started making sense. This pattern that I had of the men that I dated and how that tied back, right? Just even things being raised by a single mother and things seeing her go through. My mother was overweight for the majority of her life, and connecting that. And so, yeah, it is so important, I think, not just from a healing, but the process taught me so much about myself too, as a person, and really helped me to get the tools that I needed to not only like have better experiences with other people, have a better life for myself, but, getting back to the Christianity side of this, like living that life that, God created for us to live, and that abundant life. And I do feel like, that's one of my favorite scriptures, John 10:10. I came that you may have life and have it more abundantly. And for me, I feel like that healing was a part of me being able to have that life that God promised. And so I think that becomes a big piece, right? And so outside of the healing and, what are some other benefits to therapy? I know that in recent years, once I kind of unraveled all the childhood drama, one of the things that really helped me in therapy was like boundaries. I learned a lot about boundaries, and that ended up being very helpful in my romantic relationships and my work relationships. But what would you say are some other benefits to therapy?
Yeah, so boundaries is a major one for a lot of people
Yeah.
because we aren't really taught all the time how to do that and how to do it without feeling guilty. And then
Mm-hmm.
you have these other people in your life that are not dealing with setting boundaries. And so they're like, wait, you setting a boundary for me? No. And so it can kind of teach you how to deal with those things, how to set boundaries for yourself, how to respond when others aren't happy with the boundaries that you're setting.
Yeah.
It can obviously help resolve different traumas or experiences that we've been through. A lot of times we don't even realize what we've gone through is
Mm.
traumatic per se,
Yeah.
particularly in the Black community because we are taught so much to pick up and keep going. And
Mm.
so we're like, okay, yeah, my dad wasn't there, but neither were any of the other men. And so it doesn't even have no effect on me, but it
That's
really
how it was.
does.
Yeah.
And so learning those different things and really opening your eyes to the things that have happened and how it's impacting you.
Yeah.
I really enjoy empowering my clients in therapy, and just really building them up. That's probably my favorite thing, especially with my
Mhm.
little ones.
Mhm.
Just telling them more than you can be anything you want to be, right? Because
Yeah.
they hear that on Sesame Street. But
Right.
just like you are so powerful, and just whatever other things that I can pour into them. Um,
Affirmations.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It can, like you said, teach you about yourself and different things about your personality. Also, it can give you a space to vent almost, and
Mm-hmm.
process different things that come in your life because, we can go to our friends and we can vent.
Yeah.
However, they tend to hold on to things. So, say I might be
Uh,
going to my friend about this issue that I'm having with my boyfriend or whatever, and I get over it, they didn't.
never,
They'll hold on
never they
to it.
don't.
So then there's this issue in between them where they can't seem to get along or whatever,
Hmm.
and they're like, "Why are you going back to him?" And da da da
Yeah.
da. But um, it's like it's my relationship, and we
Yep.
worked it out.
Hmm.
Same thing with different family issues, and they can also be very unbiased because typically your therapist doesn't know your family members. And
Yep.
so I explain to people that when you come to therapy with me, it's better because I'm not, even though we will touch on different things that happened in your childhood, I'm not connecting everything to, oh, this situation or that situation. I'm
Hmm.
able to look at it with a blank slate,
Yeah.
unbiased, and see all perspectives, whereas your family or your friends might be connecting it with other things and
Hmm.
kind of blur, all these
The
different things going
lines.
on. So there's a lot of benefits for therapy, and people think, oh, that's only for crazy people or, whatever. And it's
Hmm.
absolutely not. And there doesn't have to be anything specifically wrong. Um, Really, we're just processing
Yeah.
different experiences that you have and helping you get through them.
I think that is so great, especially that last part that you said, there doesn't have to be anything wrong.
Mhm.
I just got through reading this book, Transcendent Kingdom
Okay.
by Ya Gasai. Excuse me if I say her name wrong. She's an amazing Ghanaian American writer. And that book, Transcendent Kingdom, talks about this intersectionality of like faith and mental health. And one of the things that she said she wanted readers to get out of it was that because she touches on addiction, she touches on PTSD, she touches on depression in the book. That and then from the narrator's perspective, this character is looking at all these people around her with addictions and PTSD and kind of medically diagnosed, if you will, issues, but not realizing even herself that because of that she had some things. So she was saying that that was one of the things that she wanted readers to take from it, that there doesn't have to be anything wrong with you to go to therapy, and that character's perspective was from what if she would have just went to somebody to talk. And
Yeah.
so like you said, that venting aspect, I know there are plenty of times where I on my last round of therapy, when I was going, I was like, oh, when is my appointment, because I
Right.
got something to tell her.
Yes. Yeah.
And just either venting or wanting to get that opinion. And I would love it because I would just go in and she would be like, okay, so,
Yeah.
and it just felt like a healthier way to get that out versus either carrying that anger around or putting it on someone else in my life,
Mhm.
or, just holding that in. And I love the point that you made too about the bias, right? Like,
Mhm.
that is so true. I literally just this weekend had a very similar situation where, because of the history with this person, and when I was telling somebody, I was like, I'm gonna be meeting up for them for lunch. Well, why? And this,
Mhm.
and it's just like having to explain to them that we are in a different place now, or I got my boundaries in place, I'm gonna be good. I think that's part of it too, that a lot of times our family and friends, even after we've done that work to get healed and we're on that path,
Mhm.
they sometimes have a hard time. I don't know if they necessarily believe it, but it's just like wanting to protect us. And
Right.
I do feel like as I work through my own healing, there were people that I could be around again that I now felt safe doing that. There were conversations that I could have that before I maybe wouldn't have. There were things that I can now handle without flying off the lid emotionally,
Yeah.
because I used to have a huge amount of like lack of self-control, like, and I was
Mm.
very like emotional. And, I'm like, no, I have my Zen now, people. And I was like, I got this. But my family and friends get so worried, right? Because
Yeah.
they aren't in those sessions with me. They don't, they slowly are starting to see, that okay, there's some transformation here, but you feel it yourself, right? As you go
Right.
through it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've touched a little bit on, the faith aspect and therapy. And let's talk a little bit about that because I do feel like there are a lot of Christians who struggle with this idea of counseling. I think Christians, even before you get to counseling and therapy, I think in general, Christians even struggle with mental health issues, right?
Yes.
And calling them what they are and acknowledging chemical imbalances. I mean, I was just having this conversation with a family member and she was just like, and she's just crazy, this. And I was just like, well, no, yeah, there really is a medical diagnosis. And you
Right.
have to keep that in mind in the interaction. And she was just like, well, but it doesn't matter. No, it does. So
Yeah. A
talk to,
lot.
it matters a lot, right? And so you have to handle things different. But can you talk about where that came from and why Christians have this struggle with understanding that yes, we pray and can take things to God and we have Jesus, but there's also this other thing available to us to help us.
Yeah. I think part of it is what you said, like not calling things what they are.
Yeah.
Um, and also, I think a lot of times Christians get into this feeling that they are betraying God or
Mm,
or trying to say that God is not enough, right?
yeah.
Because we always want to say Jesus is everything. Jesus, I mean, and he
Yeah.
is,
He
but at
is.
the same time, just like you trust that God brought you to the right doctor
Mm-hmm.
or all these other things like and God ordained different things in different pieces of your life. It can be the same thing with a therapist.
Yep.
Um, and so I think we have to get out of that mindset that, oh, if I go to therapy, that means I don't believe that God can work on this situation. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not what it is. God may have put this person in your life
Yep.
to work on that situation. And so it can be God ordained just the same way. Because if you had cancer, yes, we're going to pray about it. We're going to surround you. We're going to come together. We're going to agree for healing and all this. But you wouldn't tell somebody to just sit at home with the cancer and not go to the doctor.
Absolutely. And girl, just
So
take some
it's
elderberry, you'll be
right.
fine.
Yeah. We don't do that. And I understand there's also, particularly in the Black church, the Black community, this mistrust of these other kinds of systems.
Mm,
Um,
hmm.
that thought process of what happens in this house stays in this house,
Yep.
but that is killing us.
Yeah, our
Um,
secrets keep us sick.
yes.
That's that famous thing is that,
Yeah.
yeah, that popular saying rather of your secrets can keep you sick. And I think you're right that we don't discuss what goes on here and all this, drama that
Yeah.
a lot of our Black families have.
Right. And it's like we said earlier, generational. It gets passed down. And so then everybody's kind of holding it in
Mm-hmm.
and not realizing once again how this is impacting you just in your everyday life.
Yes.
Like, why are you so angry?
Yeah.
Why are you having all these issues with friends and all of that? Why are you having so much drama? All these different things could be resolved in therapy if we just work on
Mm-hmm.
healing and not trying to carry everything by ourselves, because even the Bible says we're supposed to carry each other's burdens, that we're
Yeah.
supposed to talk to each other and support each other. Well, now with a therapist, we have someone who understands the way the body works, the way the brain works, the way that our systems impact us, which is why I love being a social worker and not just a counselor, because that's what we look
Mhm.
at, is not only your own mind and your own body, but your community and how it's impacting you.
Yeah.
And you know, a lot of people in the Black community don't want to be called out on things like that,
Yeah.
but it's necessary.
Well, I like that part where you said too, I think you were just saying earlier about they tend to stay away from it of this, feeling like we don't want to feel like God is enough, God
Mhm.
isn't enough rather.
Yeah.
And as you were saying that, it made me think about, yeah, like I know people who it's so obvious when they, start going off on something or they even recall something that happened to them in childhood. And then you say, have you talked to anybody about that? Or,
Mhm.
hey, you're 55 years old. You shouldn't still be, ruminating on what happened when you were 10 or that impacting you. And I just pray about it. And then, so it's like, you want to say, well, that hasn't worked, right?
Right.
And I mean, prayer works all the time, right? That's what we
Mhm.
say, God will answer. And even if he doesn't answer it here on this side of heaven, but like, it's okay to say what you have been doing, just praying about it isn't working, right?
Yeah.
Faith without works is dead. So there are times where God wants us to pair our prayer with action, and
Yeah.
that action could be therapy to
Right.
get you to that healing, something that, yes, we have in his name because of his blood. But again, there's more than one way to get there.
Right.
And so have you had experience, like you said, even as a social worker or just in your community, what are some of the ways that you help try to help Christians get over that and to help to encourage them to kind of enter into that process?
Yeah. So one thing, kind of like what I was saying earlier, is that, you know, we often think, oh, this person called me right in the nick of time, or God
Mhm.
sent this person to say this, this, and this to me. Well, we can be ordained in that way as well.
Yeah.
Um, and I pray for my clients all the time. And especially when it's something I'm like, okay, what is it? What do I need to say to them? Give me the words to encourage them or that they need to hear. And
Yeah.
so I think people forget that God can use us too. Like there are also Christian therapists out there,
Yes.
and that
Yes.
God uses us and our words and our work. We just do it professionally. And we went to
Mhm.
school to learn more about this vessel that God created. And
Mhm.
so it's not just the pastor that can give you great advice, but
Yep.
um
Advice, keyword.
exactly,
Just
advice.
advice.
Just advice. But more than likely they didn't go to school to learn about how the mind works and how it impacts you and all these
Mhm.
different things and help you put things together. So I just like to remind people God can use me too, even
Yep.
in my office, in my professional realm, that God can speak just as clearly or, you know, even more than
Mhm.
somebody else sitting next to you at church that you trust to pray for you or whatever.
Yeah, and thank you for pointing that out because a lot of people do not realize that Christian counseling outside of your church is a thing. Like they
Mhm.
don't understand that there are Christian men and women
Yeah.
who are also counselors. We're multi-dimensional people.
Right.
And I will say that for myself, I didn't recognize that as a thing. I do think that my perception was that somehow, yes, a counselor can be a Christian, just like I'm a director of diversity and I'm a Christian, but
Mhm.
I don't show up to my job as a Christian, right? And
Right.
so I used to think that it was something that a person compartmentalized.
Mm.
And so I discovered that Christian counseling was a thing through my church. So my first as I said, time going to therapy was when I was living in Chicago and my church introduced it. And like you said, it was a thing that I feel was a God thing because as I said, I've been having these struggles, like struggles with my weight, struggles in my relationships and struggles at work. And I had been praying about it, and I had been trying stuff and nothing was working. And I remember it like it was yesterday, and it was literally like 8 years ago. That Sunday, they were like, oh, it was the announcements. We have a special guest, and the director from this counseling center got up and she was like, we're here with blah, blah, blah counseling center. We are a Christian based counselor. I attend this church, and we are offering complimentary sessions for anyone if you've ever thought about therapy, and I'm like, okay, Jesus, that's you. Right.
Yeah,
In that moment, there was still a little
exactly.
fear. I'm not lying, because
Mhm.
yes, I had a fear that it's like, what if something is wrong with me? What if I'm, you know, but I took it up. I went for it, and I took my complimentary session, and I can laugh about it now, but we're about not even done with the session, just about, and the counselor's like, yeah, I think you can benefit from therapy. I'm like, yeah, when you're 15 minutes in, you start crying,
Right.
and that started my journey, right? And so I think more churches need to do that,
Yeah.
and they were already doing good, but their counseling center grew, and they had to hire more therapists simply from our church, because I
Wow,
attended a very large mega church, and
that's
it
awesome.
was awesome to see that so many people took them up on that, right? But I can't say that I ever would have landed in therapy without my church doing that, because I too
Yeah.
had that kind of misconception of things. And so more churches doing that. And so it was so great to see, because as I moved and got involved with other churches, seeing that too, seeing that their care ministry was comprised of a list of counselors.
Yeah.
And I can say, if you are a person who, it's like, well, I don't know if I want a Christian counselor, like, what's the difference? I will say, yes, there were times where our therapy was never faith was involved with it, but
Mhm.
because my counselor understood that as a Christian woman, there were certain principles and values that I had, and she helped to align that with my faith, right? So even as
Yeah.
it came to relationships, even as it came to family, even as it came to struggles I ended up having at one point with the church or whatever, she
Mhm.
had that viewpoint and that
Right.
faith-based lens. And we prayed at the end of every
Mhm.
session. Resources that she gave me were Christian based, so I actually helped, in addition to healing me, it helped my spiritual growth,
Yeah.
being involved with a Christian based counselor.
Yeah. That's awesome. And it's so when I see clients, I don't necessarily only see individuals who are Christians, but
Right.
I do see individuals that are Christians and they're really seeking that out. And so then I know, okay, it's okay for me to bring this up into
Yeah.
sessions.
Yeah.
I'm always respectful of whatever people's religions or spiritual preferences or whatever are. Um, but because, like you said, I have that background, I have that knowledge, I can take that into the session with me
Yeah.
and kind of reel them back, like, okay, you know what the Lord says about this, like, or
Right.
whatever. And kind of bring that in as well. But it's not like we're preaching at you the whole time,
Yeah.
because I feel
No, she
like that
wasn't.
might be a fear of people as well, is,
Mhm.
well, I already go to church, I already have a pastor, like, I don't need you to preach at me, and that's not what it is, I think, at least not with me.
Yeah, that was my experience too. And she was very non-judgmental. I do feel like I have never gone to a pastor for counseling, but I
Mhm.
know people who have. I have heard some, not all, but some kind of
Yeah.
unfortunate stories, as a result of advice given during those sessions. But I do also think there is a level of transparency
Right.
that you offer a therapist who
Yeah.
is not in your everyday faith community, that you're not going to tell your pastor. There's no
Yeah.
way you can, which is one reason why I've never sought pastoral counseling,
Right.
because I'm like, part of me don't even want you to know my business like
Right. I don't
that.
need to hear it coming back out over the pulpit, none of
Right, because
that.
if I hear me in an example in your sermon, sir, ma'am, we gonna have at it.
Right.
So, and I felt like there was a very non-judgmental space with a counselor
Yeah.
versus a member of my faith community. And I think that keeps people from that too. If they think that's their only option is the pastor counseling them, then they're like, well, never mind.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why it's so important to have somebody who knows how to speak to you, when to kind of challenge you, when to kind of back down and just comfort you,
Yeah,
and able to really read those things when to know like different coping skills to provide you with, to know, okay, you might have this diagnosis, so that means we need to do these certain things to help you through this.
yeah,
And typically, unless you've gone to school for that, you don't know that
yeah.
information.
No. And so you have a lot of people in the church with um actual medical,
Mhm.
diagnosis or things that probably need to be diagnosed or even needing medication, which there's
Yeah,
nothing wrong with that either, who will walk away from that pastoral session with nothing to support them with their
right.
bipolar disorder or their PTSD or their anxiety or depression. They'll just be given some scriptures. you
Yeah,
know
because those things are real and they
yeah.
impact you. And like I said before, like I struggle with depression and anxiety. And
Mhm.
when I am completely disabled by those things, yes, I pray and I'm like, okay, Lord, like, I got to get up and go to work today or
Yeah.
whatever it might be. But at the same time, like, I also have to go to, okay, Kai, you need to use your breathing, you need to use these other techniques that you have
Mhm.
to get you through the day. And it's okay to combine the two.
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to circle back as we start wrapping up on back to us as women, right?
Mhm.
Because we wear so many hats, and like you're a mother and you work with parents and children, and you touched on a little bit earlier when we started talking about the reasons sometimes people don't um, go to therapy as it relates to just the Black church and family and secrets. Can we talk about this strong Black
Mm.
woman? And oh gosh, like I just so want to dismantle it because so this is my conflict with it. Our strength is so beautiful, right?
Yeah.
And it's there because of what we have had to endure, what we saw our
Mhm.
ancestors enduring, what we even endure now,
Right.
myself as being a woman of color in the industry that I've been in, being sometimes one of the very few. And, as we rise up in leadership and things like that. Yes, I have had to be strong. We have
Mhm.
had to be strong single mothers. But how can we also balance that with this freedom to be healed, this
Mhm.
freedom to be taken care of? Because I do think that strength has caused us to not be vulnerable, to not allow ourselves to be taken care of, and
Mhm.
to not be able to stop and say, hey, can't do it anymore. Because I do feel like there's this badge of honor. I'm a strong Black woman,
Yeah.
but I do feel like it has become toxic to say that now,
Mhm.
in my opinion. And so I struggle with saying that anymore. Maybe I don't want to be strong. I don't want to be weak. I want
Yeah.
to be resilient. I want to be powerful. I want to be empowered. I want to be, those things, but I don't want to be strong. Can you talk a little bit around your thoughts around this strong Black woman and how we can free ourselves to, be more taken care of in a sense?
Yeah, I think that we have to kind of go at it from a couple different perspectives. So, if I'm the one that feels like I'm supposed to be the strong Black woman, number one, I have to learn how to be vulnerable and ask
Yeah.
for the help that I need and get out of my head that, oh, that makes me weak if I can't do it on my own.
Yeah.
From the other side of that, also, though, we have to learn how to support each other, not
For sure.
shaming people for
Yeah.
saying they need help. Because a lot of times we worry about, well, number one, I don't want them going spreading my business
Mm-hmm.
that I came to you with this issue and now I'm
Mm-hmm.
hearing it from somebody else and I know you're the only one I
Yep.
told.
And that happens.
Yeah, so we have to be able to trust each other in
Yeah.
order to become more vulnerable with each other. Um, and understanding that it is okay to
Yeah.
have these feelings. I recently started reading this book called A Black Girl in Love with Herself, and it is an
Ooh.
amazing book.
Okay.
The
I have to get
author,
that information and we'll put it in the show
yes,
notes, y'all. I
it
love that.
is a great book, and the author, it starts off the book with talking about this one point where she was engaged and they adopted a child together, an infant,
Mhm.
and then all of a sudden they broke up out of nowhere.
Hmm.
And she was miserable, like hurting. She couldn't even take care of her baby. And
Wow.
so her mom and her sister traveled to, and I believe they were, I don't remember which African country her family was from, but
Yeah.
that was the background. And so I want to say Nigerian, but that may not be correct. But
Mhm.
her mom comes in, is like, you need to get up, you need to do this, da 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 da. And like, okay, we've been here a day.
Yeah.
So pick it up and move on. And her
A
sister's
day?
kind of, yeah. And her sister's kind of like, okay, but obviously they're
Mhm.
raised the same way with this same woman
Yeah.
that is telling them like it's not okay for you to be crying like this or not
Oof.
taking care of your baby. You
Mm.
have things to do. Well, that obviously caused, different issues or whatever, and that wasn't
Mhm.
helpful. Well, then she had friends that traveled and stayed with her for longer periods of time. And she talked about how, with her Black friends, she felt like she did have to be that strong Black woman,
Yeah.
that she could only tell them so much. She could only be so vulnerable. She couldn't really cry about it. They didn't really hold her. But when she went to her white friends, they held her forever, just
Yeah.
hugged her, and they
Yeah.
knew how to meet that emotional need. And that's
Mm.
something that we haven't really been taught. And I was like, wow, that is
Yeah.
amazing. She was like, as Black women, we have to get to that point where we feel more comfortable comforting each other. But this
Absolutely.
strong Black woman thing, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
um, has been so ingrained in us that we look at each other and say, "Girl, we strong, we can handle this, but we shouldn't have
Yeah.
to."
No.
And just to kind of share another piece of that, so last week, I spoke at the Oklahoma Social Work Summit,
Okay.
and it was a full weekend. So some of the other sessions happened, and it was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I don't know if you all have heard about the Tulsa Race Massacre. If you haven't heard
Absolutely.
about it, look at it.
Yep.
A whole block, a few blocks actually, of Black businesses were burned by white people. People were killed. It was crazy.
Yes.
So, one of the questions, and obviously the summit is led by white women, okay? And one of the questions that they asked us to discuss was, how do you talk to young people or clients that you're working with about the resilience of this population? So everybody
Hmm.
else was like, oh, it was so good. They were so strong. They picked back up, da 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 da. And I
Mm.
said, you know what? Because she went to every table to have somebody speak about what our discussion was.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm going to come at this from a different perspective. They shouldn't have had to be resilient.
Thank you.
They shouldn't have had to rebuild.
Yep.
They, yes, it's great that they were, but what choice did they have? They
Mhm.
were taking care of everything,
Yes.
their grocery stores, their schools,
Yep.
their homes, all of that was burned down and just torn completely apart. So, in order for them to live, they had to rebuild.
No choice.
So y'all are using this resilience and courage as a badge, but don't forget the reason why they
Absolutely.
had to do this. And I think it's the same thing in our lives individually is don't ignore the issues that have made us have to be this
Yes.
strong black woman.
Yeah.
Um, because a lot of it we shouldn't have to do. We shouldn't have to be
Mm-hmm.
raising our kids on our own. We shouldn't
Yep.
have to hide our pain and our struggles because we should be supporting each other. We should be there for each other.
Yeah.
And so when I think of that strong black woman, I think of the same thing is way too often we are put in these situations where we don't have any other choice and it's
Mm.
killing us. And
Yeah.
what's killing us even more is not even being able to go to each other as sisters to say, hey, I'm hurting. I can't do this. Can you please come watch my kids for a minute while I just drive down the street?
Yeah.
Whatever it may be,
Sometimes that's simple.
and not hear, well, girl, I gotta and I
Mm-hmm.
just come. And I've
Yeah.
always been that friend
Yeah.
that I don't care what's going on. I'm dropping it.
Mm-hmm.
You need me, I'm on my way. Send me your location. I'm on the road.
Right.
And it's hard because I don't always get that in return. Um,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I have to remember God called me to be who I am and who
Yeah.
I am to other people. And He will, I've increased my circle with other women who do the same thing. But because I've had the experience of, hey, I need you, and oh, well, I can't do that, or
Mm.
sorry, I'm busy, or not even picking up the phone, I don't even
Or
want
like, girl, me too. I'm
right.
struggling.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
I don't even want to pick up the phone and reach out to anybody. So then I'm just struggling by myself.
Yeah.
So we also, there's the side that we have to be more open and
Yeah.
expressing how we're feeling, what's going on, and being more vulnerable with each other. But we also have to do a better job at supporting each other and dismantling that strong black woman thing and the way that it has become toxic, like you said.
I love that. Those were, y'all have to run that back. Listen to that all again. I mean, because that is so key. And I like what you said there. Well, all of it, but like you were saying at the end, is that we have to tap in, right? And so many of us are not only tapping in and being vulnerable with the people that are closest to us,
Mhm.
our, significant others, our family members, our colleagues. We're not even tapping in all the resources that we have,
Right.
like therapy, sis, you got insurance,
Yeah.
or, more recently, I know a few people who took leave of absence, you got short-term disability, sis. Like, but
Yeah.
even, and they were Black women, but that struggle that led up to that, right? When there are
Yeah.
so many other, being on the management side of things, I have had so many non-Black, you know, colleagues and employees with the quickness take that
Yeah.
FMLA, will tell
Right.
you I'm depressed or I got this going on, and they take that time for themselves.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, I usually ask people, what's your favorite trip and why? But I actually want to pick your brain about some of your favorite resources to offer up to the community. And so, with that idea of tapping in, books, podcasts,
Okay.
information like that, especially from this perspective of, women and, needing to heal, resources, communities where we can support each other on being more vulnerable, therapy, and as it relates to perhaps parenting as well too. I have a lot of single mothers that listen to the
Yeah.
podcast. So what are some of your top resources that you can share with us?
Okay, so I'll start off with mine.
Yes.
And so I have Notes by Kaya, the podcast, which is talking about parenting, mental health, the family, and the way that parenting and that foundation can impact children and their mental health. I throw in adult mental health in there as well,
Okay.
because it's all important and it all ties together. I also have a Facebook group, Parents Raising Mentally Healthy Children, where I give
Okay.
free resources, advice, all of that. You can ask questions, and it's a full community where we are looking more at children's mental health and the importance of um, seeing that they are impacted by different things that go on in their world. And of course, you can
Mhm.
find me at Notes by Kaya on Facebook, Instagram, all the things.
Awesome.
Um, and then 211 is available pretty much anywhere. So you can just dial on your phone 211, and
Mhm.
whatever community resources that you need, they pretty much have, or can get you connected to someone else who knows how to reach. And of course, there's a suicide hotline.
Yeah.
If you need that, don't be scared to reach out, and talk to somebody about how you're feeling. But 211 is one that I can give, and it's not just Oklahoma, it's not just
Right.
Texas or whatever, but it's one where you can find whatever it is. And I began my career as a case manager, and so I typically can find resources pretty quickly. So
Yeah.
if there's something specific and you feel like you're not finding it, feel free to DM me, or, whatever, and I can help you find those resources. There's therapy for Black girls.
Love them.
Um,
Love them.
yeah, they have a huge reach.
Mhm.
And so
And
those
they have a
are,
directory. You
yeah,
can use their directory to pinpoint a therapist in your area as well.
yeah, absolutely. And my website is notesbykaya.com, and that's KHIA. I'm sure it'll be in the description and all of that. But I have blog posts and all of that, and
Mhm.
you can reach out to me if you would like me to help you find something specific.
Awesome. That is so great. Well, you can't leave the Travel Price Lay podcast without having a Beyonce moment.
Okay.
So tell me, tell me your favorite Beyonce song and why.
Oh,
This
um,
is always hard.
it is because you know what? I was thinking about that, and I was like, what would my favorite be? I would say Dangerously in Love is pretty classic, but
Mhm.
that is, I still keep that as a Destiny's Child song. That
Yeah, right.
she
Because that
no,
was on the last album. It was
yes,
like a bonus
it
track on
was
that
on
album.
Survivor.
Yep.
So, I will say Upgrade You is one of
Hey.
my absolute favorites. And then I've been playing the album from Coachella a lot. And I don't know why,
I love me some
but
Homecoming.
yes, that whole thing is just so good from top to bottom. And
Yeah.
so, but I would say Upgrade You as a single is probably one of my
Mhm.
most favorites.
Yeah. Well, and I come back to Homecoming as well too, because like I think you just think about that moment, you think
Hmm.
about the blackness of it, the
Yes.
women's empowerment of it, the way she mixed stuff. It was
Yeah.
amazing. I
Yeah.
when Coachella happened, I was actually in Paris at the time. And
Okay.
my friend will tell you, she was like, I cannot with you because we're literally like on tours on the Champs-Elysees. And I'm literally like over in a corner, like with my little SIM card trying to stream the rest of the Coachella performance and like watching stuff over and over. And I could barely enjoy Paris, y'all,
Wow.
for the day
In
because I was
Paris.
so obsessed with
That's so funny.
so obsessed, watching it unfold or whatever. So yeah, that Homecoming has a special heart, a special
Yeah,
place in all of our
it's
hearts.
different.
It's
It's
different.
definitely an experience listening to it every single time.
Yeah.
So,
Well, thank you so much. You have given us so much information. I really enjoyed this conversation because, I love to talk about therapy and the impact of it. And I
yeah.
think we need to continue to normalize it, not just make it a trend, but, truly, truly, make it there because again, we all want to level up. We want to live this life that God created for
Mhm.
us to live. And, it starts with us healing ourselves and helping to heal those around us. And like you said, uplifting and supporting our sisters. And
Yeah.
so, check in with your sister. Just make a promise to yourself after this that you will tap into some of the resources that Kaya talked about, that you'll check on one of your girlfriends and yeah, maybe offer to babysit the kid or bring her lunch, or truly, when you ask how she's doing, truly let her tell you how
Listen.
she's doing.
Yes.
Because we have a tendency to gloss that over as well too.
Mm.
So as always, I want to hear from you and your thoughts on the podcast. Would love to hear if you all have your own journeys of therapy and what that has meant to you, and some of your favorite resources that help you on your mental health journey. So thank you once again, Khia, for being with us.
Thank you
And
for having me.
of course, and until then, see you all on the next episode.
Bye.